The alarm screamed before I even opened my eyes, and the floor of my ship was already tilting hard to one side. Sparks fell from a broken panel above my head. I grabbed the nearest handle and pulled myself up, my ears ringing, my heart slamming against my ribs like it wanted out. "Ethan, we are losing altitude fast," said the ship's calm computer voice, which somehow made everything worse. "Impact in 40 seconds. I did not have 40 seconds worth of ideas. I had about 3 seconds worth of ideas, and none of them were good. I strapped myself into the pilot chair, gripped the controls, and aimed the nose of the ship toward what looked like water below the clouds. Water was softer than rock. That was the whole plan. The ship hit the surface like a fist hitting a table, and everything went white for a moment. When my vision came back, I was hanging upside down in my harness, coughing from smoke, with alarms still crying somewhere behind the static. I unclipped myself, dropped to what used to be the ceiling, and crawled toward the cracked door. Outside, the sky was a strange shade of orange, and the water around my ship was already rushing in through a long tear in the hull. I grabbed a bag with emergency supplies, forced the door open, and jumped into the water before the ship could pull me down with it. I swam. I did not know where. I just knew that staying near a sinking ship was a bad idea, so I kicked toward the nearest shape of land I could see through the waves. By the time I dragged myself onto the rocky shore, my lungs were burning and my hands were shaking, but I was alive. That was more than I expected an hour earlier. I did not get long to catch my breath. The ground shook under a heavy rhythmic sound, like something enormous was running. I turned and saw shapes moving between the rocks, tall and fast, covered in dark armor that did not look manufactured so much as grown. They were not running toward me. They were running toward a much bigger structure further inland, a huge dome rising out of the hills like a small mountain, with lights glowing along its ridges. I should have stayed hidden. I should have waited quietly until I understood where I was. Instead, I heard something that stopped me cold, a sound like a scream, except layered. Several voices tangled together, coming from the direction of that dome. I do not know why I moved toward danger instead of away from it. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was simple stupidity. I grabbed a length of broken metal from the wreckage on the shore, because it was the only thing close to a weapon I had, and I ran toward the sound. The scene near the dome was chaos. Creatures with dark armored plating were pushing against a group of taller, more slender beings whose skin shimmered faintly, like polished stone under moonlight. The armored ones were winning. A section of the dome wall had already been broken open, and smoke poured from the gap. I did not understand the situation. I did not know who was right or wrong, but I saw one of the slender beings fall, and another one try to drag her away, while more armored attackers surged toward a narrow tunnel entrance that seemed to lead deeper inside the dome. If that tunnel fell, the attackers would be inside completely. I ran into that tunnel entrance and swung the metal bar with everything I had. I will not pretend I fought like a hero from a story. I was clumsy, terrified, and mostly lucky. But the tunnel was narrow, and only one attacker could reach me at a time, and every single one of them who tried to push past me met the end of that metal bar. My arms burned. My breathing turned ragged. At some point, someone shoved a strange weapon into my hand from behind, something that hummed and pushed back attackers with a wave of pressure instead of anything sharp or deadly, and I used it without knowing exactly how it worked. Voices shouted behind me in a language I did not understand, but I understood urgency. I understood the sound of people who were terrified and fighting to protect something. So I stood in that tunnel and refused to move, because moving meant losing, and losing meant something behind me would not survive. I do not know how long it lasted. Time gets strange when your whole body is running on fear. Eventually, the pressure against me stopped. The attackers pulled back, retreating toward the shore the same way they had come, and the tunnel went quiet except for my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Behind me, others were already moving, carrying the wounded away from the tunnel entrance and toward the safety of the inner chamber. A young Vistari with a torn shoulder was helped past me, her breathing shallow but steady, and I realized for the first time just how close that fight had come to going the other way. My hands would not stop shaking. I set the metal bar down carefully, as if it might still be dangerous even now that the danger had passed. Someone touched my shoulder. I spun around, ready to swing the metal bar again, and found myself looking at one of the slender beings, her skin catching the light in soft blue and silver patterns, her eyes wide with something between shock and gratitude. "You held the tunnel," she said, in careful, accented words that I somehow understood, thanks to a small translation device clipped to my collar that must have activated at some point during the fight. "You held it alone." I did not really think about it that much, I said, my voice shaking. I just did not want anyone else to fall. She studied me for a long moment, like she was trying to decide if I was real. "My name is Yara," she finally said. You saved my sisters. You saved this entrance. Come, my mother will want to see you. I followed her, mostly because my legs were too tired to argue, and because I had nowhere else to go on a planet I did not know, surrounded by people I had never met, all because my ship had fallen out of the sky at exactly the wrong moment. The inside of the dome was unlike anything I had seen before. The walls pulsed gently, almost like they were breathing, and soft light came from veins running through the stone like glowing rivers. Yara led me through wide corridors filled with quiet, watchful eyes, until we reached a massive chamber where an enormous figure sat upon a raised platform. She was easily twice the height of Yara, her skin a deep shade of violet, her eyes glowing faintly gold. When she looked at me, I felt like a small animal standing in front of something ancient and powerful. You are the one from the sky, she said, her voice layered with multiple tones at once, like an orchestra speaking a single sentence. The one who held the tunnel against the raiders. I am, I said, deciding that pretending otherwise would be pointless. For 900 cycles, our people have defended this hive from the raiders who come from beyond the ridge, she said. They were not always our enemies. Long ago, we shared this land peacefully, before a change in their leadership turned them toward conquest instead of cooperation. Since then, every generation of my family has spent its strength keeping them beyond our walls. In all that time, no outsider has stood their ground the way you did tonight. Warriors trained since birth have broken under less pressure than what you faced with nothing but a piece of scrap metal. I did not have a plan, I admitted. I just knew I could not step back. Her golden eyes studied me carefully, and something in her expression softened, though I could not fully read an alien face yet. There is a debt between my hive and you, she said, and debts of this size are not repaid with simple words. I had a strange feeling that I would not like whatever came next. You will be given the highest honor our people can offer, she said. You will be joined to my daughter Yara, so that your courage may forever be woven into the bloodline of this hive. The room went completely silent. I looked at Yara, who looked just as surprised as I felt, her eyes wide, her mouth slightly open like she wanted to protest but had not found the words yet. With respect, I said carefully, choosing every word like it might set off an explosion. I am grateful for the honor. I truly am. But where I come from, a decision like that is not something one person can hand to another as a reward. It has to be a choice made by both people involved, together. The queen tilted her head slightly, her golden eyes narrowing, though not in anger. It looked more like confusion, as if I had spoken a sentence that did not translate correctly. You refuse the honor? I refuse the idea that it can be decided without her having a voice in it, I said, glancing toward Yara. If this is truly an honor, then it should feel like one to both of us, not just be announced like a rule. For a moment nobody moved. Then Yara stepped forward, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. He is right, Mother. This choice belongs to me as much as it belongs to him. I already made mine 3 nights ago, in that tunnel, when I saw him refuse to fall back even once. The queen looked between the two of us slowly, and something in her expression shifted from surprise into quiet respect. Then perhaps the honor is not mine to give after all, she said. Perhaps it is only mine to allow, and the deciding will belong to the two of you. That should have been the end of the tension for the night, but peace on this planet, it turned out, never lasted very long. An alarm sounded through the dome, sharp and urgent, followed by shouting voices echoing down the corridors. A guard rushed into the chamber, breathless, speaking rapidly in a burst of words that the translator struggled to catch up with. The raiders did not retreat completely, Yara said, translating quickly for me as the guard spoke. They pulled back to gather more of their kind. They are massing near the eastern ridge, preparing for a much larger attack, one meant to break through the main gate instead of the side tunnel. The queen rose from her platform, towering over everyone in the room. The main gate has not held against a full assault in 3 generations, she said. If it falls tonight, the hive falls with it. I felt my stomach twist. I had barely survived one narrow tunnel with a metal bar and a borrowed weapon. The main gate sounded like something far bigger, far more dangerous, and far outside anything I understood. How much time do we have? I asked. Perhaps an hour, the guard said, through Yara's quick translation, maybe less. Before we could plan further, a second scout arrived, carrying a strange device pulled from a fallen raider near the ridge. Yara turned it over in her hands, studying the markings etched into its surface. This is a signal caller, she said. They use it to time their strikes across different points at once. If we can learn its pattern, we can guess where they intend to hit hardest. She pressed a small control on its side, and the device let out a series of quiet clicks, evenly spaced, like a countdown. They are planning something coordinated, she said. Not one wave. Several, timed together, meant to spread us thin along the entire gate instead of one narrow point. That single piece of information changed everything. It meant we could not simply defend the strongest section and hope the rest held. Every point along that gate needed someone who would not step back, and there were not nearly enough trained warriors to cover them all. Yara turned to her mother. We need every defender we have, and we need someone who understands how outsiders think, because the raiders have started copying tactics from ships that crash onto this world. Ethan has seen those tactics from the other side. The Queen's golden eyes settled on me again. Will you stand with us once more, Skywalker? Not because it is owed, and not because of any honor, simply because it is right? I thought about my ship at the bottom of the water, about the fact that I had nowhere else to go, and about the fear on Yara's face when she thought her sisters would not survive the first attack. There was really only one answer. I will stand with you, I said. The next hour moved faster than any hour I had ever lived through. Yara led me through weapon stores built into the dome's walls, showing me devices that pushed enemies back with force instead of causing lasting harm. Tools built more for defense than destruction. The Vistari, as I learned their people were called, did not fight to destroy their enemies completely. They fought to protect their home, which meant every weapon was designed to stop an attacker, not end them. I liked that about them immediately. We reached the main gate as the first wave of raiders appeared on the ridge above, dark shapes moving in disciplined lines, nothing like the chaotic rush from earlier that night. This assault had been planned. This one was serious. They learned from your tunnel, Yara said quietly beside me. They will not send one line into a narrow space again. They will spread wide and hit multiple points at once. Then we need to make sure every point has someone who will not step back, I said. We spent the next few minutes rushing along the wall, placing defenders at every weak point Yara pointed out, using barriers built from the same living stone that made up the dome itself. I fought beside Vistari warriors twice my height, learning their hand signals as we went, trusting instincts I did not know I had. When the raiders finally surged forward, it came all at once, a wave crashing against the gate from 3 directions at the same time. I stood at the center point, the weakest section according to Yara, with a weapon humming in my hands and my heart pounding louder than the alarms behind me. The fight that followed was the hardest thing I had ever done. Every time I thought a section was holding steady, another wave pressed forward from a different angle. Yara fought beside me the entire time, her movements quick and precise, clearly trained for exactly this kind of defense. Between the two of us, we held the center point far longer than either side expected. At one point, a raider broke through a weak section of the barrier and rushed toward a group of younger Vistari sheltering behind the main line. Without thinking, I threw myself into its path, using the humming weapon to push it back with a wave of force strong enough to send it stumbling into the mud outside the gate. My arms shook from the effort, but the younger ones behind me stayed safe, and that was the only thing that mattered in that moment. Partway through the fighting, a shout rose from the western edge of the wall. A smaller group of raiders had used the chaos to slip around the main line, attempting to climb a narrow rock face that led toward an unguarded storage entrance behind the gate. If they reached it, they could open a path straight into the heart of the dome, undoing everything the main defense was trying to hold. Yara saw it first and pulled me with her, sprinting along the inside of the wall while the center line continued to hold under the weight of the other defenders. We reached the rock face just as the first raider pulled himself over the ledge, and Yara knocked him back down with a sharp, controlled strike from her weapon. I planted myself at the narrow gap in the rocks, using the same trick that had worked in the tunnel earlier that night, forcing every attacker to come at me one at a time instead of all at once. It was not easy. My arms had already been pushed past their limit once tonight, and now they were being asked again. But giving up was never really an option once I understood what would happen if that gap fell. Between Yara's precision and my stubbornness, the climbing raiders were pushed back down the rock face one by one, until the attempt broke apart entirely, and the remaining attackers scrambled back toward the ridge. Slowly, painfully, the tide began to turn. The raiders, seeing their wave broken at every point they tried, began to pull back toward the ridge, retreating the way they came. A cheer rose from the defenders along the wall, tired and ragged but full of relief. I dropped to my knees, exhausted beyond anything I had felt before, and Yara knelt beside me, her hand resting gently on my shoulder. "You held again," she said softly, "not because anyone asked you to, because you chose to." "I think I am starting to understand your home a little better," I said, catching my breath. The Queen arrived not long after, moving through the crowd of exhausted defenders with quiet pride in her golden eyes. She looked at the gate still standing, at her people still breathing, and finally at me and Yara sitting side by side against the stone wall. "The gate held," she said, "because of choices made freely, not honors handed down from a throne." "That is usually how the best things work," I said, managing a tired smile. In the days that followed, the hive slowly rebuilt what damage had been done during the attack. I helped where I could, learning more about Vistari customs, their history, and the quiet strength that ran through every one of their traditions. Yara and I spent long hours talking, not about duty or honor, but about simple things, our favorite foods, our fears, our hopes for what came next, the same way any two people getting to know each other might talk, regardless of how different our skin or our worlds happened to be. Some evenings we walked along the repaired wall, watching the orange sky fade into deep purple, talking about nothing important at all, which somehow felt more meaningful than any of the grand speeches given in the throne chamber. Other times we sat with the younger Vistari who had been sheltered behind the line during the attack, listening to them ask endless questions about my home, about ships, about a species they had never known existed until the night I fell out of the sky. There was no ceremony forced upon us, no announcement made without our voices in it. Instead, there was simply time, spent honestly, one conversation at a time, until the choice the Queen once tried to hand down became something Yara and I built for ourselves, brick by brick, the same way the defenders rebuilt the broken gate. My ship was gone, sunk somewhere beneath the waves, but I found that I did not mind staying. Not because I had nowhere else to go, though that was true enough at first. I stayed because somewhere between a narrow tunnel and a shaking gate, I had found people worth standing beside, and one person in particular who had chosen me just as much as I had chosen her. The Queen once said that only a hero deserved her daughter. I learned something different during those long, difficult nights defending a home that was not originally mine. Nobody deserves another person simply because of what they have done. What matters is the choice made freely, again and again, long after the danger has passed and the alarms have gone silent. That was the real honor, and it was one neither of us had to be given. It was one we chose, together, every single day after.